Okay, so it is in the works. So we should be all set here. It's always a pleasure to have a special guest with us today. I was fortunate enough to meet Shawn last year as part of some personal growth I was doing professional speaking. And we share very similar childhoods in that our mothers used to dare us to come inside in the summertime. So he has turned this into a really interesting career of getting people outside, spending more green time instead of screen time. So welcome so much, Shawn, Mr. G, Mr. Nature Guide. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
And thank you to those of us joined backstage. We're so thrilled you're here. Let us know in the chat where you're coming in from, as well as if you've got questions during our discussion. We would absolutely love to answer those questions, so feel free to put those in the chat. So I'm curious, Shawn, how you got involved in teaching people to go outside. It sounds to a 70s kid who basically spent their life riding bikes with skinned knees constantly outside. My mother, for those of you who know my mom, would dare us as kids to come in unless it was inclement weather. And then we were sort of banished to the garage to play board games. We were constantly out. And then at 9 o'clock or so, we would have to finally come in after playing flashlight tag. So I know your childhood's quite similar, but Shawn, how did you get involved in encouraging people to spend more time outside?
Well, when like I said, I was just want to back up. Like my mom was my nature mentor. She noticed that I was a nature-centric kid. And when I brought home an orphaned animal, or I wanted to learn something more about the natural world, she never said no. And she always did this. She's like, we need to go to the library and get a book. So she taught me nature connection with literacy. And then always through exploration and having that free range childhood, like you just talked about, going out all day, street lights are on, you are home, and then time to wind down. And then as I was progressing in my naturalist journey, my father gave me a book, and it was by Tom Brown Jr. It was called The Tracker. And so I was probably 17, 18 years old. And then I went to his first class out there. It was in wilderness survival, awareness and tracking. And I was hooked. And then from there, I went to Eastern Michigan University. I became a science teacher. I was hired to teach wilderness survival. So I taught wilderness survival to juniors and seniors, taught them how to connect, and more importantly, how to survive. So kind of like the book we were talking about, where going outside was a rite of passage, knowing the trees, the plants, knowing how to track, knowing what animals are out there, what is going to hurt you, and what can you eat, right? So these are the things that I grew up doing. In northern Michigan as well, we had 40 acres of woods that we were just constantly outdoors exploring. But then as I was moving through my professional teaching career, I just noticed the distractibility of my students. And then I was moving through trying to teach them. We all of a sudden had a cell phone policy where you were taking cell phones away from kids during instruction. And it got pretty bad. I was taking cell phone after cell phone, putting them down in the office, and the parents were coming to pick them up. But the behavior wasn't changing. My kids were still distracted in the learning environment, and parents weren't helping out as well. So that was kind of where I started to notice this. And then everywhere I went, I would be on vacation and I would see kids, trying to explore outdoors, but they were glued to their devices all the time.
Right.
So it's like those moments are just passing them by. Their birthright was not being exercised because they had something in their hands. And then in the last couple of years, it's just really, really been, my new focus for my life is to help parents, mentor parents in how to help their children overcome digital distraction.
And I've seen that in my own family. I think I shared with you, there was a family member that I was responsible for taking care of while their parents were out of town. And, I saw it with my own eyes. She was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I woke up to a noise and went to check on her because she had been sick. And here we are, school's the next day, and she's on her computer. And so I took it away. Next day, she had homework, so I had to give it back to her. Took it away a second time that evening and woke up to her playing on the computer again. And I realized that, she's getting some kind of like dopamine hit from being connected, even though in the hours she should have been asleep. And it was terrifying to me because I know my mother used to tell me as a child, and clinical research suggests that if children aren't sleeping, they're not growing. And that's a little scary, not only mentally, but physically. It stunts their growth if they're not getting enough rest.
Yes, that is so true. By the way, when children sneak media or they sneak their stuff, it's called deception. And the kids can't really help it. They need that hit of dopamine. They need that device to be in their hands so they can start to kind of soothe themselves at night. So that's another behavior where they are withdrawn into that device so they can soothe. And that's when you self-soothe with a digital device, that is another warning sign of digital screen media addiction. So that's when you really have to try to talk the best you can to your children to say, hey, listen, we want you to grow up big and strong and tall, and sleep is so important. So can you please let Uncle Shawn take this away and I'll give it back to you, to give them a little bit of control in what they're doing, and just not taking it away and having this knee-jerk reaction, but really working with your child, because the digital world never sleeps. It's on 24/7. And it's up to us to really give them the tools to navigate this fast-paced digital world.
And I'm reading a book by Jay Shetty right now, who was a monk for a while, and it's about how to be a monk. And he talks about rituals and how when we wake up and when we go to sleep, we really need to sort of protect our time, because when you wake up and if you immediately turn on that phone, your body goes into this response mode where you are literally programming your brain to constantly be on alert, and it causes fatigue. And so I've really created a ritual for myself that when I wake up, I leave my phone plugged in at night in another room and I don't go get it. So that first hour, my ritual this time of year is immediately once the cats are looked after to go out into the garden. But for many people, that first adrenaline hit, and then you're handling the world's problems, right? You're handling the text message from your mom, and work needs this email, and you're immediately on alert. And I find that for me, the digital distraction is you aren't present in the moment. And that's what gardening has done for me, is it forces you to be in the moment. You can't time travel. You've got to be worried about what you're focused on right here. And our digital devices seem to be taking away the present moment from us. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I've seen this time and time again when I was an educator. Even when I teach adults, I have to have strict rules by saying, turn off that phone. We're out here in nature. You're not worried about what is waiting for you at home, what files so-and-so didn't send you from work. You're here and now. And it's almost like you can see them wringing their hands. They're just so nervous. There's a form of anxiety when you do not have your device with you. And my wife has even said it. She's like, I can't sleep unless my phone is in the bedroom. So I'm now looking into getting her own clock where she can wake up, because you're right. That first hour of time when you wake up, I have my own morning ritual. It's called the best method. So I breathe. I envision my day, how it's going to go. And then I kind of enter what I call the sacred silence downloads from the universe or the creative energies or whatever you believe in. What are my downloads? What are my intuitive flashes? And then I'm thankful. So that's the T part of my morning ritual. So I'm thankful for what I'm about to eat, the water, the air, who I'm going to encounter throughout the day. What am I going to learn about other people? And most importantly, myself as I move through my day. So I do a form of that twice a day. And that's usually accompanied with, it's a core routine called the sit spot, where I go out into nature for at least 15 to 20 minutes. I'm not plugged in. So I get up, I do that. Then I go outside, I'm listening to bird languages. I'm watching the shadows on the trees as the sun, crests the horizon. And then I watch the world wake up. And that's an indigenous, spiritual practice I got from one of my elders, that you would do that in the morning. And then you would have that thankful contemplative time as the sun is setting. What did you learn? Who made a difference in your day? So those things are two connective rituals that you have, where you are going to get up, now plug in, step outside, listen to the birds, listen for those first the first bird calls, I listened lately for the first bumblebees in my garden.
Yeah.
Because you can hear them. They'll start humming in. And I'm like, there's the first one. And what flower did that particular bumblebee go for? So these are just little things that nature awareness do for you. And then pretty soon, what we call making a connection or a thread with that individual plant and animal. And then over time, those threads become thicker, and then they become ropes of connection between that bumblebee and between that lavender plant that he likes to go to in the front of our garden there. So these are things, just part of my daily ritual, that you really have to learn how to sit quietly, be good with yourself, but allow nature to come to you. That's what we call nearby nature. It's all around you, hopefully, that you'll be able to see nature come to you, because you are quiet. You have a quiet mind and a quiet heart, right? And allow that connection to happen.
I love what you're saying. And you had an acronym for that. So we went through that really quickly. So can you say that acronym again for maybe anybody who's listening and you missed it?
Yeah, the best morning method. So I'm breathing. I can do a 7 count, inhale, hold it for 5, let it go. I might do that for 2 minutes. Then I envision my day. What are those important things that I need to get done, or those important connections that I need to make? I'm sending good energy to myself throughout the day. That's basically what I'm doing. So envisioning, and then the silence, the S, the sacred silence of allowing the forces of the universe, the creator, God, whoever you believe into, to give you that download, to give you some inspiration. And then the T, I'm being thankful for the plants and animals that are giving themselves so I can live another day. I'm thankful for those elders, those mentors, those people that are just going to help shape me to have a good day. And of course, sometimes you have to give thanks to the cranky pants that made your day bad. but that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn as a human, that not everything is roses. We'd love to, but there are going to be some challenges throughout the day.
No, I love that you're setting your intentions for the day. I also love that you're not allowing your digital life to distract you from this practice. And I think this is what Jay Shetty's getting at, is that you need these routines, that your body needs to not think about it. You just need to do it. And you integrate it into your day. And that's your sacred time, your routine that you do every morning, whether it's the drink the water, the breathe, whatever it is, that you, as soon as you get up out of bed. And some people, for me, a lot of times I sleep in my yoga clothes, so that especially in the winter, the exercise isn't an issue. Right now, I'm getting tons of exercise in the garden. I don't have to program the workout in my day, because I get it every day in the garden. But in the winter, I usually sleep in my yoga clothes. So there's really no excuse. I just roll out of bed and that's then part of my routine. But that mindfulness, that putting out in the universe what it is you want for the day, anticipating the things that are going to happen, how you want that meeting to go, or that conversation with your family member, or whatever it is, like sort of anticipating and setting up a successful conversation or meeting or your day, I think it makes a major difference because you're in control at that point instead of someone else running your day by answering those emails or text messages. We have a common friend, Joe Lau, therealjoelau.com, who talks about that those distractions, that one text message or second tab open on your computer. He really talks about how those things, once you pay attention to it, it then takes you off of your task you are working on for 20 minutes. That's how much. So if you're like, I didn't get anything done today, this is something I've learned from Joe, is that you focus on that one task for the day. And Jay Shetty talks about this, that one task, according to clinical research, people that were one taskers, which is multitaskers, the one taskers were more efficient. They could recall information better. They actually were more successful at almost everything they did without exception. So I love the fact that you're talking about like sort of intentionally setting a precedent for your day. I think it's so important.
Yeah. And even when people are doing that, I've ran across studies that have said before standardized tests, this is what I do with some of my teachers, go outside for 15 minutes before those kids jump on that computer and take that standardized test. They're going to get their little antsies out. They're going to just have their attention. They're going to just forget about that they're about to go into a standardized test on a computer.
Right.
And that some of the early studies are saying that girls are more responsive to being outside for that little bit of green time than the boys are. So just by the fear, the sake that you can look out the window and see a garden, that helps kids perform better. It lowers their heart rates. They just something about the color green and our mind evolving on this planet with so much life, with looking for natural shapes. We call those nature neurons, making sure that those nature neurons are being connected, because right now, the teachers are overwhelmed. They're not worried about taking their kids outside for green time. They're worried about that standardized test. And as adults, we need to be worried about, well, how much green time are our kids getting each day?
Yeah. And so the statistics on that, at least in my non-scientific study during COVID, here in Pennsylvania, we were highly locked down. I think you were in Michigan as well. But we were allowed to be outside. They didn't close our state parks, which was great because I got to see more state parks than I had ever seen in the last 5 years of living here. But I will say, while I saw more children on bikes, which made me very happy, I was out in my little tiny forest behind my property that we own just beyond our creek, clearing out invasive exotic plants. And not one day, not one, did I ever see a child in the woods. And I was so disappointed. And I'm hoping to, I've written some notes already. You've had so many great pearls, Shawn. But, it concerns me that you've shared with me that there's actually some bullying going on with our kids about being outside.
Yeah. I just recently ran across this, and it's called outside shaming. It's like, what do you mean you're going outside? We're gamers. We spend our time inside. Wow. So it seems to be the kids that are playing the Fortnite, the high action games, that the kids are now shaming each other because this is what we do. We're gamers. We spend all our time inside on that device. And I'm running into people that aren't coming out that used to be outside playing in my neighborhood. And I'm just kind of getting word of this outdoor shaming now. And if that's the case, we have a lot of work to do, because if we're waking up to those phones, just imagine you're in 8th grade and someone calls you fat online, right? So now I have to worry about that all day as an 8th grader. Now someone's going to make fun of me because I'm outside recreating and doing sports or riding a bike even. What are our kids going to go and what are they going to do? And who's going to help them navigate that form of kind of digital bullying?
Right. And I think, I read a book during pandemic that I highly recommend, which is The Last Child in the Woods. And I was horrified that they can't even do clinical trials to compare our childhood to the modern childhood because so few children spend any time outside whatsoever. And they're looking at health statistics. Like it was a big deal when I was a kid to be on the presidential exercise award, to be able to do so many pull-ups and so many, do you remember that? So many sit-ups, and you had to run a mile in a certain amount of time, but it was a big deal. But so many children today already before the age of 20 have cardiovascular disease, obesity, and other lifelong chronic health problems because they're just not getting enough exercise. And furthermore, we know that one of the things that contributes to cardiovascular disease is sunlight deprivation. So vitamin D. So I'm curious what you're seeing as an average for most families when you first start working with them. How much time are people actually spending outdoors?
It's about it's around 2 hours a week, less than 2 hours a week.
So less than 30 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm. And with my program, the things that I do, as I said, that 30 minutes a day is your baseline. Every day you need to be out a minimum of 30 minutes. I was talking to my optometrist, of course, you'll see me, I'm putting on my glasses on and off. And I asked him these questions about myopia increasing in America. And he said it's about 40%. It's up to 80 to 90% in the Philippines and in some of the Far East countries that by the time kids leave high school, they're wearing glasses. They have some form of corrective measure because so many of those kids are spending time on screens. And so I asked him, I go, what do you think is going to help my children have good eyesight? He's like, they need to be outside 2 hours a day.
Wow. No, I mean, I can tell it in myself. I mean, certainly during pandemic, I wasn't traveling. I was Zooming with clients all day. And then with Master Gardener, we had training every week. So those were on Zoom too. So there were days that I was doing 12 hours of Zoom, which is ridiculous. And I started to get ocular headaches. I've never had them before, where you see rainbows. And the first time it happened, my husband, who's a physician, I'm like, is this permanent? Like, it terrified me that I had destroyed my eyesight from staring into a computer all day. So we do know that you need to be staring not only close up at a screen, but distance wise too. And, I recognize that, if I spend a lot of time staring at a screen, I have to force myself to walk away and go outside and walk in the garden or walk with my cats. My cats like to go on nature walks, as you know.
Yeah.
So, but because I don't want that to happen. I mean, it got my attention the first time, but then I had two more. And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm potentially going to although it looks pretty cool to see rainbows, to see them all the time, maybe not. So I want to just share my personal experience because clearly I'm in my 40s, but what about these kids who are spending significant parts of their day in front of a digital device? Do you have any data on what's the average screen time for a child today?
The data, I'm going to start with parents first. So before pandemic, it was almost 8 hours. It was like 7 hours and 40 something minutes.
Right.
During COVID, it was over 11. Wow. So that's well over an extra work day on the phone, just probably aimlessly scrolling. So I know that some of our older kids between the ages of, I'd say like 13 to 18 are on almost 7 hours.
Right.
Our middle schoolers are around 5 right now. maybe because hopefully there's a social component. They're maybe starting to play sports. They're getting into other things in the middle school, going to the high school. And then when you have like K through 6, their time is around 6.5 hours a day. So they're still really, really high, those moments that they're missing of being outdoors. And more importantly, when I look at how fast my kids are growing right now, I'm losing quality time with them. And I just, it's a battle with me, even with them, to keep them off their devices, because that's the world that their friends have.
Sure.
And I think it's a hard one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's setting the precedence, right? So again, in my own family, I have a child that has been brought up with a cell phone, an iPhone, since she was about 4 years old. And then I have 2 other children who have very strict limits on how much time they're allowed every day. And part of that is they have to read. So I get it. But you know, you can just tell by the conversation and their ability to engage. And I've seen that with my friends' children too. The children who, so I have a set of parents in Colorado. Early on, when those children were very small, their house was broken into and all of their electronics were stolen. This is now almost 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
But those are some of the most engaging, intelligent, questioning, like fun children to be around, because they have never had a TV. They just don't watch it. And they're both highly, highly intelligent and creative and musicians and so forth. And just a delight to be around, where other people, when they bring their children to dinner, they're handed a phone and they can't carry a conversation with me. So I'm seeing it in the workplace, where we're having millennials now join teams that I work on, and they can't carry a conversation. They'll text you, which in my world in clinical research isn't allowed. We have to document every single conversation. So it's really, we're having to go back and train them how to correspond. And that sounds completely insanely ridiculous, but you know, I will say that it's easier to hand them a cell phone. There's no doubt, or put them in front of a TV. And this is not about parent shaming, but it is up to us as a society to say, hey, time out. You know, what are we doing here? And I find it very interesting that some of the people who've created these technologies themselves don't allow their children to have them.
That's right. I read that study talking about how Jobs, Elon Musk, and Mr. Bill Gates didn't even allow their children around that technology until after they were 14. So that's the puberty starting, moving into now that brain is going to start, you know, pruning a little bit. But it is so important that, yes, those limits, your family limits, are kind of followed and agreed upon. You need buy-in as a family as you're making those limits. So our children aren't the distracted ones. Could you imagine your child coming home and in their early 20s or whatever, they might still be living with you? Oh, what's wrong? Oh, I got written up. Well, why? I was on my phone. Yeah. That's real. We've had to do some things like that, because I've been in high power business meetings where a ping goes off and my associate, she's like, I'm sorry, I have to take this, and jumps on it. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, she was 30 years younger than me, and we're in a big sales meeting. That was another part of my life, but you're right. It is so real. It is so real. And I just have a small story. I just was recently at a birthday party, and I noticed 2 kids really, really lethargic, kind of like not engaging in it, and what I thought was a pretty fun party. And then I asked one of the parents, oh, well, why so-and-so looks tired, looks whatever. Oh yeah, those 2 are up gaming all night. Yeah. And so they were hanging out with their gaming friends, but then they come to a party and they're so tired and withdrawn and just exhausted, right, that they weren't even going swimming or going off the diving board, because they spent all night in that alternate reality, but they couldn't even relate to a fun party. It was really just eye-opening for me again. I like to go over there and find out what's happening. And then I find out and I go, oh, okay, makes sense.
And I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is we as the adults have to set some limits and some boundaries. We would not let our child eat an entire box of donuts for good reason. And it's the same thing. You know what you feel like when you've overdone it digitally. You feel that lethargic, like you've binged a whole bag of Doritos. You know what I mean? It just doesn't feel good. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we have to set the example. And that means when you're with, in my case, nieces and nephews, you've got to be the mentor. You've got to model the behavior you want to see in your children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, in my case. And, I try really hard to cut my phone off and put it in another room, because I used to do this with my sales reps years ago. We would go to lunch. In many cases, this was the only time I was going to see them for several weeks or months. And I would leave the phone in the car, in the glove box. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not the president. No one is going to call in the next 45 minutes that is more important than you right now. And I think it's incredibly important that, we try to, lead the way and say, you're the most important person in this room. I think you said that about your own children, that they're growing up so fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just tell them that it's a form of love, that if I didn't have this conversation with them, because when you look at the digital economy, it's designed to keep our children on those devices as long as they can. It's designed to take their attention and to manipulate it and keep it on there. So when I tell them, hey, there are a group of people behind this phone that are trying to keep you on here, scrolling or listening to more music or go to YouTube, they're there to make sure that you're on here. And if I didn't tell you this, I wouldn't be a mentor. I wouldn't be your father to say that there's people out there that just want you on here all the time. So can we put that down and go ride a bike? Can we fly a kite? Can we just let's sit in a hammock quietly? That's just some things that I've just been doing lately with my kids. Let's go sit in a hammock. Let's listen to the wind through the trees and the different bird calls, because now my sons know how to find our cats when they get out by listening to bird language.
Oh,
We have a house wren that is nesting on our front porch, and every time one of our cats gets out, these guys go nuts. And then my sons will go out and be like, oh, I know where my cat is. And every time the birds will lead them to the cat. So now they don't call, oh, Smokey, Boots, whatever. They just listen for birds. So that's another powerful nature connection that I've been teaching my children, bird language. It's a predator response for those birds because they're raising their families, right? So,
right. Yeah. Well, and it's an important thing to learn, because when you're out, right, those warnings can mean the difference between, you going home alive or not. I was in India years ago, and they have these deer in Ranthambore Park. The guides call them tiger snacks. But they're these little deer, and they will scream when there's a tiger nearby. And so the guides trying to find the tigers for the tourists, people like me who want to take pictures of them, listen for that call, exactly what you're saying. And sure enough, here comes this huge female tiger, and the deer are screaming to let everybody else know that she was there. Now, she had already eaten, so she didn't care about them. But I can assure you, if she was hungry, they were letting everybody know, like stay at it.
That's so true. That was when we talk about old school or nature school or indigenous practices, primitive living skills, all the different names go on and on. But every child on this planet learned this way. They were mentored by elders that knew what plants to eat, what time of day to go hunting, where to find the cleanest water was, where to stay away from that female tiger. They were taught that way in bird language and tracking and herbology and, mammalogy and all these ologies that we have right now in the modern world. That was the oldest of old school for Homo sapiens 1.0. That's what I call us, because we are still keen on those natural cues to seek wilderness, to understand. Like those kids are just natural scientists. They want to know how things work. Why does this bird live here and not there? How come I see the deer here but not over there? They start asking these questions and they start looking for clues, and they try to answer those questions with the natural world. And that's something that doesn't exist. And Howard Gardner talked about there's a naturalist intelligence that our schools don't even touch. They're learning, they want us to know, can we move our bodies? Can we have relationships, inter and intrapersonal connections? Can we solve math problems? Can we play a musical instrument? Right? But they're not saying, well, how do you navigate the natural worlds? It's not being taught.
Right.
And that's just, it's just so sad, because that's how we were taught before the Industrial Revolution happened. And that's the way we still want to be taught. But we're trying to put all these kids in these boxes and try to teach them. And anything with gardening or outdoors, I mean, gardening is starting to take hold, which I'm so happy about, Heather, you know that. And they're finally getting these programs to get these kids to feed themselves. But
right.
Hundreds of years ago, it wasn't even a conversation. Yeah, we got to get up and feed ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly with the increase in food prices, I think everyone should grow a garden. And, I think it's important for children to understand where their food comes from and, and why food tastes the way it does. It's so much more full of nutritional value when you grow it in the soil and you consume it right away, instead of being shipped or trucked for thousands of miles before it shows up on your doorsteps and lost a lot of its value. So you said something that I wanted to say, which is you're certainly encouraging all of us to be nature mentors. And I do think it starts in your own backyard and taking your children or grandchildren out and having them explore and understand why things are important to you, whether it's, my grandmother's peony that's in the front yard that I want them to inherit and take into their own gardens, or why we grow the food we do. My niece is celiac, and so we have to be super careful what she eats. And we were just on vacation where we didn't have as much control in the restaurants, and she had an attack, sadly, because some cross-contaminated. But one thing she can eat without fail, regardless of where we go, is pickles. And so she asked for pickles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because she knows it won't make her sick. And so she's not just somebody that avoids wheat. This is a real thing for her, and it'll affect her the rest of her life. But I wanted to say that, she's gotten super interested in gardening because of pickles. And, we call her Pickle sometime because she will eat them. It's like, I can eat them here, I can eat them there. She's a Dr. Seuss book when it comes to pickles. But I took her and her brother to with me. My placement this year for Master Gardener is a historic home called Craighead House. And Craighead House, I highly recommend. If you don't know about the Craigheads, they're quite famous in this area because they were naturalists. They spent 16 years in Yellowstone. Everything we know about grizzly bears pretty much came from those twin boys. But the sister is Jean Craighead George, and she wrote over 100 children's books. This one's probably the most famous one, My Side of the Mountain. It's a Newbery Honor Award member. And I was thrilled to hear you say that your mom took you to the library, that was one of the things you want to learn. We're going to go to the library. My childhood is very similar in that regard. So we're a family of readers, big time readers. And I've bought my niece a ton of these books, my niece and nephew, because they're super interesting, because her brothers were falconers. But the house sits on one of the most famous trout streams in America, the Yellow Breeches. Okay. And so while I was working in the garden, we're restoring those gardens to what they would have looked like at this historic home into the 1930s. The kids were fishing. And when we were done, we walked around the corner to a very famous swimming hole. So we jumped off trees and, swam in the water. It's freezing cold, which felt really great because it was super hot that day. But I've never seen two more exhausted kids. In fact, we are just our Broad X, which is our cicada 17-year emergence, was going on. And my house isn't involved, but where their home is, and I wanted to hear them. So on the way taking them home, I kept rolling down my windows because it's so loud. It's just like a stadium of insects. And I think it's kind of cool. And they're like, please roll up the window. We're so tired. So my point is that's the other reason to get them out is they're exhausted. By the end of the day of sun and fishing and swimming in the creek, they were done. Dishes were done. I like handed them to their parents. I'm like, you're welcome. Yeah. So, but I don't ever remember struggling to sleep as a child because we were constantly outside.
Yeah. That kind of goes along with this. Who is the babysitter in one respect? Like when our mom and dads kicked us out and said, don't come home, the neighborhood, our bikes, our friends, and the forts and the creeks and the trees we climbed, nature was part of the equation as we connected and we exhausted our bodies, our minds, and our spirits somehow were connected during that time. But now when I go back to what I just talked about with seeing those couple young men at the birthday party, they were only mentally exhausted.
Right.
They were just tired. Their eyes were swollen. They could just barely even hang out with anybody. And sorry to say, they looked like they were gaining some weight.
Yep.
And so they were not exhausted on all levels of your being. And that's something where as nature mentors and moms and dads and caregivers, if you're an older caregiver, you remember this. So now you have to be that fun uncle or grandma and grandpa that are going to take those kids out on a wander. That's another core skill, wandering. Just take them wandering. Let them explore without time set. What is this? What is that? Have you seen that before? Just ask questions. You don't have to be a naturalist or a master gardener or anything like that. You have the ability to ask questions, right? So wander with your kid. And then when they come back, here's another core thing that I teach. Have them draw a map. Where did we go? Make your own map. Did you like that tree? Oh, well, let's call that the tree map. And then they go, and they'll just do the dotted line. And here's the tree. I don't care it's not about how Picasso-like it is. It's about that they're mental mapping their way to and from a location, right? And here's another thing that I teach my kids, explore field guides. You have to know what someone else knows about this red fox, Vulpes, right here on the front cover of this. I have so many field guides around my house. I have my own nature library. I call it the nature nook. And that's what I tell my moms and dads, make a special place where you can take your kid and they can explore field guides, have them dream. And then after they do that, journal questions. Oh, where can I find where the red fox lives? So they have a nature journal. And those are some of the core routines that I teach parents to help fight digital dependency and addiction is you have to take this object and you have to put something else in their hands, right? You have to do that. It's not quitting cold turkey. And I'm not saying that you should never let your kids use a cell phone. No, that's not the point. It's the point of balance. It's a point of having a hybridized mind that I can solve problems with this device, but now I know the environment and the world that I live in. Did you know that kids can only identify 10 plants and animals, but they can identify close to 1,000 corporate logos?
That's crazy.
And one of them's Christmas tree. So that's 9. Yeah. They can only identify 9 plants and animals in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
They have no nature literacy, right? And the books help out with literacy.
Sure. And I think, they have to understand to care, right? You have to
Mhm.
know why it's important or why you should avoid that plant. Or, I have several people who've told me, and I'm hosting a garden tour here in central Pennsylvania. It's on my Facebook page, The Thoughtful Gardener. If you're here locally and you'd like to visit you, I'd love to show you or show your kids and get them excited about butterflies and caterpillars and insects. But I've had multiple people tell me my kids are terrified of insects. And I'm like, why? To me, it's such a foreign concept because, again, on those nights, summer nights like now,
Mhm.
we were constantly catching lightning bugs at night, putting them in a jar and running around with our lightning bugs. We also dissected quite a few bugs. Just
Okay.
was interested in that, so we did.
Mhm.
Wanted to see what was inside. Inevitably, when somebody says, we saw this bug, what is it? Or we saw this moth, what is it? I can identify it, but I can identify it because I've been identifying it since I was a child. I know exactly what it is. But what I tell people when they're in the garden, because I have a pollinator garden right now, it is full of bees, hundreds of bees right now. And the majority of them are our native bees. We have over 400 here in Pennsylvania.
Same
A lot of
here.
them are in the bumblebee family. I can
Mhm.
assure you they're completely not interested in me. Some of them are as large as a quarter, and some of them are as tiny as the head of a pin. But
Mhm.
the point being is, and this is what I tell people when they're in the garden, they're not honeybees. There are some, but for the
Mhm.
most part, these are native bees. They are not interested in you. They are really busy collecting pollen. They're not defending a nest, and you're not going to get stung. So I tell them, if you get nervous, just hum. And they're like, people are like, well, what does that do? I'm like, distract you from the fact that you're scared of a bee.
Yeah.
It's not about, they're not going to hurt you. And,
Yeah.
and I think this is part of what I'm starting to see, which is people are afraid of nature. And
Yes.
it's like, wow. So if you don't know what it is, you're scared of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I found this about traveling. It's really easy to be scared of that person over there if you've never been there. And
Mhm.
I've been all over the world. So I'm not afraid of anybody. Are there bad people? Sure. There are bad people in my backyard. I'm sure. You know what I mean? Like, there, but the point being is you have to educate yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be afraid because you don't know what it is.
Yeah, you're right. And when we go back to why our children are afraid of things. So when I was teaching wilderness survival at the high school, we had a whole unit on fear, rational, irrational fears. What are you afraid of? Let's go through how not to be afraid of something anymore. But here's going back to a field guide again. This is one of the first field guides I've ever got: poisonous plants and venomous animals. So my mom and dad taught me what is going to, hurt you. And then luckily they gave me another field guide, medicinal plants. So they didn't know all the names. They'd say, Shawn, make up your own common name for that plant. But now this is what we call coyote teaching, because all of our kids are Googled. They want to know the answer now, and then they're going to forget about it. They didn't work for the answer.
Right.
But if I want to know what deadly nightshade is, I better go study what deadly nightshade is and how it's going to affect me if I mistake it for a little berry in the garden. Maybe these are little itty bitty tomatoes that the kids, kids are kids, right? And so keep them away from the nightshade. But I learned the nightshade family by sitting around reading this with my mom and dad because they were nature mentors. Now, a lot of us aren't, right? So where are you going to go to get nature mentoring? And those are the programs and things that you put on and I put on for parents to say, let's get outside for 30 days. Let's record our time. Let's talk about our adventures. Let's tell stories and journal about all these little adventures that we've had in our neighborhood, in our gardens at home, and at state and national parks. So these are the things that I do as a nature connection specialist. I like to give everybody some form of it's about empowerment, right? It's like yesterday I didn't know. Now today I know a little bit better, a little bit more. And now look at how your family unit will change. I've had people tell me that their family units now, after 30 days, they're like, well, it's kind of ingrained. Are we going to go sit in the morning? Oh yeah, sure. Let's grab our cup of coffee. Let's grab our drink. It's usually water because we're giving thanks for water. And let's go sit and see who can spot the first bumblebee to visit the garden. I love that sit spot theme. Who can see the first pollinator coming to the garden in the morning?
Love it.
So if you're waking up at 8:30, I'm sorry, you're going to lose. But if you're up at 4,
they're out there way earlier than that. I can assure you.
So 4:30, 5 o'clock, you're going to get out there and see who sees the first one. So you have to challenge yourself in this digital age to want connection, to want our children to be healthy and happy. And for them to have coping skills when it comes to using, all these digital products and knowing where they live and how to protect what they know, right? As we kind of mentioned that, how to protect what we love.
So, Shawn, you bring up a great course or a great, point about, really staying connected by, doing things with your family actively outside. All of the tips you just gave are great, but I know you've got a challenge coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about your nature challenge?
Yeah, so it's called the Less Screen, More Green 30-Day Challenge. And I invite caregivers and families to come together, take the course where we chart out 30 days of nature connection, 30 days of activities. So I give you a weekly planner, and I give you a 30-day planner, and I give you all these ideas of how to connect with nature. But the great thing about this is that every Sunday, I have an accountability community campfire call, as we call this. So Sunday nights, we like to plan our weeks out. And so we get together, we talk about what's been working, what are some of our great adventures, and then what are our roadblocks? What are my pushbacks with my family when it comes to, let's say, being afraid of bugs, right? That's something that we talk about. Well, how do I get my young one not to be afraid? Now, you told me hum, right? So we talk about some of those hurdles, and then we talk about, wow, we went to this really cool state park in Indiana. Well, what's the name of that state park in Indiana? And then we all write it down. Or you're in Pennsylvania. Hey, what's out here? Well, can I go see if I'm driving through? So now we're trying to start this challenge to be, I would love to serve 10,000 families. That's like kind of my big, audacious, hairy goal, is just to help 10,000 families out and to have those families mentor someone else in nature connection, because we can't do this alone, right?
No doubt.
We're all in this big, big nature world, this big planet, of ours. And we need to teach our young ones how to connect, how to protect, and, how to love each other while we're on this rock. Right. So you can find that at challenge.lesscreenmoregreen.com. So it'll be CHLG at the end. So it's not challenge. So it's Less Screen, More Green, CHLG.com. And you can find where you can sign up to be part of the community. And right now, I'm offering founding prices on my services for the whole year. Whenever you start, it's always going to be the same price forever. So great. I'm going up. I just got the new workbook in. You get like a 20 page workbook with this. And it's something that I really dove into with my family over COVID to get ourselves off the screen time and into the green time, because I noticed the physical effects of even my children going through this. So it kept me up as a parent. I worried about it. And then more importantly, I kind of fast forwarded into the future. And I go, what would our planet be like if our children were unable to tell nature stories about building those forts, about discovering a new plant that they could eat, or a new butterfly, or a new insect, or a new tree, the mighty oak. I climbed this bur oak the other day. Oh my God, it was great. Like those kind of stories, right? I want our children to be able to talk to us like Heather, you and I talk to each other, right? Absolutely. We have these memories. And it's a generation that aren't going to have memories of the outside of the natural world. It's all going to be Fortnite. It's all going to be these video games or these augmented things. And I'm not saying that they're bad, but we need to somehow strike a balance where I have a nature connected a child, and then he can come in and kick my butt at Mario Kart. You know what I mean? We have to allow that to happen.
Yeah, there's got to be balance for sure. And for those of us backstage, I did put that in the comments. If you want to get in touch with Shawn, he's got his information on his challenge. And if you want to save that information, you can go down to the more dots and click on that. And then you can hit the save chat button there. We'll also put it on our Facebook Live for those who are viewing this either through Facebook or view it later. So you'll be able to reach Shawn. And I'm super grateful to have you here, Shawn. You are my highlight of my day.
Thank you.
So nice to know that there are other people out there encouraging people to grow their own food and get outside and enjoy nature and sort of relive, if we want to talk about, throwbacks, relive our own childhood through these children and sharing the joys of what we experienced as kids outside, and certainly end this digital bullying that's happening for children who are being told that they shouldn't be outside. It should be the opposite. You shouldn't be on your computer or gaming all day. But I want to thank you so much for being here. And certainly for anybody here who's interested in seeing the pollinator garden, we've got monarchs right now, lots and lots of hummingbird moths actually this year. I'm delighted. They're part of my favorite thing to see in the garden. Certainly a whole host of swallowtails, caterpillars, nice, and other creatures. I have a family of skunks this year. They're super cute, a little smelly, but super cute.
Oh yeah.
So love to invite you if you're in the local area on Wednesday, the 28th, coming up from 9 to 1. We will also be hosting the Master Gardeners that day, and they will be selling native plants. So if you'd like to attract more of this wildlife to your backyard. So the information can be found on my Facebook page, The Thoughtful Gardener. And certainly we are putting up more and more educational videos on our new YouTube channel, Garden Thoughtfully. So if you'd like to know how to create a pollinator paradise in your backyard, love for you to join me there. And Shawn, I am super grateful. We'll be putting this on the YouTube channel, and really appreciate all of your insights.
Can I leave you guys with one question from one of my nature heroes and mentors? It's Rachel Carson.
Okay.
And she said, a child's positive connection to nature depends on two things: special places and special people. And I hope that we all can be those special people for our young people and take them to those special places that call out to us and to help us become nature connected and just a little bit wild around the edges, right?
Absolutely. I love that. Wild around the edges. I'm going to put that in my article. So thank you again. And thanks to those who were joining us backstage and on Facebook. It's always a treat to be able to host you. And we'd love to be able to get your feedback as to other things you'd like to see on The Thoughtful Gardener. I love inviting people like Shawn, who's such an inspiration to all of us. So please let us know what we can do and garden thoughtfully. Take care, Shawn, and everyone backstage. Have a good afternoon. Take care. Bye now.